I feel like it's really good, and then when they do the reveal of what's actually going on, everything is like crammed so close together where you're just like, this happened and because of this, and this is how we're going to resolve it, bye, or whatever, They do, it's kind of this slow burn until you get to the third act, and they're like, oh yeah, here you go.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. I felt like everybody gave like great performances. As you said, the soundtrack was great. I really liked how it looked.
Oh yeah. It looked amazing. The cinematography and the colors in the film, even the trick photography where someone's walking down the stairs and you can see the other woman like in the mirror, or when they're sitting in the booth.
Yeah, and it's somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, and Anya Taylor-Joy is the one sitting in the booth, but the mirror behind the booth is Thomasin McKenzie. Like all those tricks are really cool. The cover of Downtown is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. That's really her, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that whole sequence is good, and sometimes it's almost like a Fight Club thing where sometimes Thomasin McKenzie is that character, and then sometimes she's like watching
from out like an outer body experience.
Did you see it in the theater?
No, I watched it at home. Right, yeah.
Yeah, because Universal's like streaming stuff like within about 40 days.
I wanted to go see it in the theater, but nobody wanted to go with me.
What?
So I was like, oh, okay. Then.
Go by yourself. It's the best. I go by myself all the time.
But no, I enjoyed it. It was different. Hopefully, I know it didn't do well at all. Mm-hmm. So I hope that doesn't scare Wright into never doing anything like that again, because it was a good attempt, Mm-hmm. I had fun with it.
It was just they just couldn't get it there.
They didn't bring it all the way home.
Yeah,
but it's very close.
It is. It's a good movie. I just wish it was better. Like you said, that the third act seems very rushed, and that's the third act was the part of the movie I did not care for. Let's talk about a movie that I saw that I don't think you saw that I loved, and that was The French Dispatch.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I haven't seen it yet.
Very good movie. I know Wes Anderson seems to be kind of divisive these days, with some people really into him like me, or there's some people that just like can't stand his whole thing that he does, thinks he's a little too twee, thinks it's a little too like dollhouse stuff, but I love his aesthetic, I always have. We obviously covered a Wes Anderson film on the show this year, and the French Dispatch was so good. It's an anthology film because the whole premise of the film is that it's a magazine, and the different stories are the different articles in the magazine.
Okay.
And it's kind of got this wraparound story of the editors trying to figure out what stories to keep in the magazines. They start off the movie and there's, a plethora of stories. They're trying to figure out which ones to keep in the magazine, which ones will make this issue and which ones won't. And the cast is completely stacked. As always, Wes Anderson has his usual players in it. Bill Murray is the editor-in-chief of the magazine. So they don't have very much because they're only in these couple of minute scenes in between the stories. God, who else? Frances McDormand, Adrian Brody, Benicio del Toro, Timothy Chalamet, Ed Norton, Saoirse Ronan, Jeffrey Wright, who was amazing in his part. And his part's really cool because it's his article, but that article is kind of bookended and some interstitial stuff with him on a talk show. And Liev Schreiber's the talk show host, interviewing him about this story that he wrote. So it's kind of a nesting doll with the film. And the Benicio del Toro and Léa Seydoux, Adrian Brody, black and white with some color stuff. That is the first major story, because the film also has a quick introduction with Owen Wilson riding around on a bicycle around this French town, kind of introducing you to this French town, and then it goes into the three main stories. The first story with Benicio del Toro and Adrian Brody and Léa Seydoux is really good. There's a great transition of time between Tony Revolori, who's the kid in the Grand Budapest Hotel, and he's the younger version of Benicio del Toro, and there's a great shot of just this passage of time where it shows him sitting down, and then he gets up, and Benicio del Toro sits down. He's now the older version of this character. It's a great little scene. That's really good. The middle section with Frances McDormand and Timothée Chalamet was my least favorite of the three. Not to say that it was bad. It was just not as good as the two main ones that are on either end of that middle story. But the end story with Edward Norton and Jeffrey Wright and Steve Park, who's great. Steve Park, who's a comedian that was on In Living Color years ago and always kind of pops up in smaller roles, is fantastic in it. Saoirse Ronan is great for, I think, like the 40 seconds, 60 seconds that she's actually on screen. Everyone in this movie is on screen for a small amount of time, with the exception of the main characters in those three stories. But I loved it. Susie loved it. She went with me to watch it. Probably the most Wes Anderson film of all time. Just because of how it's told.
Yeah.
Grand Budapest had a lot of those flourishes, but I think this kind of beats it with not only the stacked cast, but just the way each story unfolds. Like I said, the Benicio del Toro one is mainly in black and white with some color. Even the Timothée Chalamet one is a lot of it's in black and white. And then the last section, the one with Jeffrey Wright and Edward Norton, there's actually an animated portion of that story that's really fun. But I loved it so much. But I'm also a huge Wes Anderson fan. And this was one of my favorites, actually.
Is that still playing?
It might be at Hillcrest still.
Okay.
So if it is, I say definitely check it out if anyone is interested that hasn't seen it yet. If in fact it is. I mean, I haven't checked Fandango. It might have gotten bumped with the Christmas releases. But you might have a couple of showings of it per day. Yeah, it was one of his best.
Okay. I have to check that out. It sounds very interesting. I love the trailer. So, and that cast is so insanely stacked, you know. How can you go wrong?
Yeah. Like I said, it's kind of like Grand Budapest, where some people are in it only for a little bit. But, I mean, there's probably 30 different actors that you know that are in that movie. Even if they only have, 60 seconds of screen time.
And you're going to hate me for this, but I really enjoyed Ghostbusters Afterlife.
I don't hate you for that. It was just a movie that I had zero desire to see, even when you told me, hey man, you should check it out.
Yeah.
I have plenty of opportunities to watch it. I just had no desire whatsoever to watch it.
So hopefully at some point you'll check it out.
It's possible.
Even if it's just at home. It's a great film. The cast does a great job. I loved the fact that they brought everything around to the original story, and they very much touch on the mythos of Gozer, and then
Who I do know, it's Olivia Wilde, and she's uncredited.
yes, crazy cameo.
That's not her voice, though. That's Olivia Wilde in an uncredited cameo, but not her voice. I recognized the voice as soon as I heard it. It's Sheree Agdashlu, who's Iranian, who's in The Expanse. If another show that I love that I just recommended again for like the second or third time on this show last week. Who plays Avasarala on The Expanse. She's got a killer voice. Real, like, throaty, deep, sounds like she smokes like 2 packs of cigarettes every single day voice. But as soon as I heard the voice in the movie, I knew exactly who that was. But go on, and I just wanted to say that I know that Olivia Wilde was on cameo, or was uncredited in the cameo.
Also, it's a great kind of farewell and love letter to Harold Ramis, in my opinion. Again, don't want to give too much away, but it's definitely worth seeing. I enjoyed I saw it in the Dolby Atmos Titan, and the sound design is incredible. That's probably
that's a good theater. Mm-hmm. That specific auditorium is a good theater.
Yeah, the CGI is great. Mm-hmm. From what I remember, Paul Rudd is great as usual. It's
got Carrie Coon. Carrie Coon is great.
Yeah. Great references to, of course it's going to, but just kind of doing callbacks to other great 80s films, like Cujo and Child's Play and stuff like that. Really enjoyed it. If you're a fan of the Ghostbusters, check it out. Even though I think it did really well, right? The box office. Way better.
It did pretty good.
I know it opened up way bigger than they anticipated. Do you remember by chance the box office numbers?
Looking them up right now, it opened to just over 44 million, so that's pretty fucking good. And right now, its domestic haul is 121.5 million. And then it's made about 56 plus overseas. So pretty solid box office. Doing well. It's still playing. Well, we've talked about the 3 movies I actually watched. I'll save my favorite of the year for last. But right now, No Time to Die, which was the first movie that I saw since, in the theater at least, since February of 2020.
Okay.
So that was the one that I went back for. Playing it cautious. Can't be too careful these days. Try to go to shows that are the less populated. Still keep my mask on the entire film. Don't sit anywhere near anybody. So the first movie I went to go see was No Time to Die, because that was strictly only in theaters, and it's James Bond. I love James Bond, and it was Daniel Craig's last Bond film, so I definitely wanted to go and see it, and really enjoyed it. I think it's getting kind of... it got a little bit of critical disagreements on it, but I think overall a lot of people really liked it. It's kind of closes out the chapter with Daniel Craig, the Daniel Craig films. I know that Quantum of Solace gets a lot of shit. I actually think it's a fairly tight action movie, except the action is not great. Mm-hmm. It's very quick and shaky, and the movie's short, and it seems like it's an action scene like every 5 minutes. There's another action scene. So I know that movie gets shit on. I know that Spectre gets shit on. I like them all because I've liked all the Daniel Craig ones. Yes, they're lesser than Casino Royale and Skyfall, but I think all the Daniel Craig films have been solid. he's been the most consistent